The moment I stepped into my parents' house, I stopped in my tracks. From the dining room, I heard my mother's voice, steady, almost satisfied. Vanessa's kids eat first. Selena's boys can wait for what's left. My sister laughed. My father didn't even glance up. In the corner, my son sat quietly, empty plates balanced on their knees, pretending not to be hungry. My chest tightened, but inside I felt a strange calm. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain. I just gathered my boys and walked out. What they didn't realize, what none of them sensed, was that the instant they pushed my children aside, they pushed themselves even further away. Yes, I'm Selena. And if I'm honest, that scene in my parents' dining room didn't come out of nowhere. It was just the first time their pecking order was so obvious, so loud, that even my silence couldn't shield me from it. The truth is, this pattern started long before Jalen and Theo were born. When I was 17, working my first part-time job, my mother, Ellen, always sounding on the edge of a crisis, asked if I could help with groceries. My father, Harold, practical to the point of coldness, nodded and said it would teach me responsibility. $20 here, $50 there. Before I knew it, giving became automatic, a habit, then an expectation. By college, they were sending me photos of bills and repair notes. When I called to check in, my mother's voice always trembled in just the right places. I didn't see it then, but looking back, it was a performance, worry perfectly timed. After I graduated and started my first full-time job, the requests changed. They weren't "could you help" anymore. They became "we really need you." Dental work for my dad, a broken appliance, a car problem. It was always urgent, always an emergency, and always seemed to line up with my payday. Then there was Vanessa, my older sister. She was the one my parents bragged about. Her kids, Lily and Caleb, were always invited, always praised, always treated as the standard. When her car broke down, I paid for repairs. When she needed help with insurance, I covered it. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family, right? But when I married Darius, a patient, steady man who saw more than I ever did, the imbalance became sharper. He'd ask, "Do they ever offer to help us?" I'd laugh it off. "They're busy." But every holiday, every celebration, I noticed the seating, the invitations, the subtle distance. Darius would quietly step back during family conversations, as if he already knew he wasn't part of the script. Then came the kids. When Jalen was born, my mother held him like he was fragile, not precious, uncertain, as if she didn't know where he fit. When Theo arrived 2 years later, my father congratulated us, but his eyes flickered with the same hesitation. I told myself I was imagining it. I blamed exhaustion, stress, anything but favoritism. But children notice what adults ignore. Jalen learned early that his cousins got first pick, the best toys, the biggest slices. Theo picked up on the seating arrangements, how Lily and Caleb always sat near the adults while he and Jalen were sent to play in the other room. Every time I felt that ache in my chest, I convinced myself I was being too sensitive. The requests for money never stopped. They only grew: mortgage help, medical bills, a sudden roof repair, some new emergency that always popped up right before a holiday. And every time, I said yes, believing that generosity would eventually close the gap. But it never did. The day I walked into that dining room and saw my boys in the corner with empty plates, it wasn't just a shock. It was recognition. Nothing had changed. I'd been funding a system that pushed my children to the margins. I'd been supporting a family who saw my boys as afterthoughts, not equals. Standing in that doorway, watching Lily and Caleb get seconds while my son stared at nothing, I finally understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was the way things were meant to be. And once that realization settled in, something else rose up, something sharp and certain. I wasn't going to let them overlook my sons again. When I returned to my parents' house that evening, I thought the worst was behind me, that the humiliation of seeing my boys in the corner was the breaking point. I didn't realize the real trigger was still waiting, hidden beneath the surface like a fault line. When I opened the door, the house was too quiet, not peaceful, just empty. I stepped into the hallway and heard it again. My mother, Ellen, the woman who raised me on Family First, was speaking in that same justifying tone. Vanessa's kids eat first, she said. Selena's boys can wait for the crumbs. It's only practical. Vanessa, always assuming her children belonged at the center, gave a small laugh. It's better they get used to it now, she added. They were born to live off what's left. My father, Harold, steady, logical, never emotional, closed the circle. They need to learn their place. That's just how things are. I moved before they even realized I was there. In the warm light of the dining room, I saw it all. Lily and Caleb finishing their second helpings, sitting comfortably at the table, while Jalen and Theo hovered by the doorway, waiting for permission to exist. Jalen met my eyes for a moment, and in that look, I felt something break. He wasn't confused anymore. He understood exactly where the adults in this house had placed him. That was the moment. Not the crumbs, not the empty plates, not the laughter. It was the look on my child's face, the quiet shrinking, the practiced acceptance of less, that changed something in me. I knew then that nothing I said would matter. Words wouldn't fix this. Confrontation wouldn't change them. But systems can be dismantled. Support can be withdrawn. And after years of paying for this family's comfort, I held the one lever they never expected me to pull. The real trigger wasn't their cruelty. It was my decision in that instant to stop funding it. I didn't slam the door when I left that night. I didn't raise my voice or make a scene. I simply put a hand on each of my boys' backs, guided them to the car, and buckled them in. The silence between us felt heavy, but I kept my breathing steady for their sake. Kids read everything in the smallest cracks of a parent's face. When we got home, Darius, who never missed a shift in my mood, opened the door before I even reached for my keys. One look at me, one look at the boys, and he knew. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, let's get them settled first. He helped Jalen find his sketchbook, guided Theo to the couch, and put on his favorite nature documentary. Only when they were busy did Darius return to the kitchen, lean against the counter, and wait for me to speak. I didn't know where to start, so I started with the words that hurt most. My mother said, the cousins eat first, I whispered. And my kids, my boys, should wait for the crumbs. Darius's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. And my sister laughed, I continued. My father backed them up. They weren't joking. They meant every word. I expected anger from him, outrage. But instead, Darius exhaled slowly, like he'd always known this day would come. Sick, he said softly. Saturday, Selena, he began. You've been supporting that whole household for years. Bills, repairs, payments, all of it. And you've never asked what it's cost you. Not in money, but in dignity. I wanted to defend them, like I always had. But nothing came out. They don't see our sons as family, Darius said. They see them as a complication. And they see you as the solution they can drain without ever being grateful. I didn't argue. I couldn't. That silence between us wasn't defeat. It was clarity. He reached across the table and took my hand. Then he asked quietly, what do you want to do? And just like that, the plan began. I stood up, went to the drawer where we kept important papers, and pulled out my laptop and a blank legal pad. I'd bought it months ago for work notes, but it had stayed empty until that night. I drew 4 columns: mortgage, auto, utilities, emergencies. Then I opened my banking app and scrolled through page after page of transfers, payments labeled just until we're caught up. Family helps family. We're short this month. It's just temporary. Under each category, I wrote dates, amounts, details. The pad filled up faster than I expected. When Darius sat beside me, he didn't interrupt. He just slid a second pen across the table in case I needed it. By midnight, the pattern was clear. 8 years of support, structured, steady, almost scheduled. They've built their lives around my income, I whispered. And their arrogance too, Darius replied. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because something colder had settled in my chest, a kind of quiet steadiness I'd never felt before. I'm done, I said. Darius nodded. Then let's make a list. First, I called the mortgage company. I asked about my options as a co-borrower. The agent explained the process for removing myself, refinancing, qualification requirements, possible sale if they couldn't meet the numbers. I wrote down every detail. Second, I called the auto lender. I instructed them to require my authorization for any credit changes or refinancing tied to my co-signature. Third, the utilities and payments I'd set up during emergencies. I canceled every automatic transfer. Fourth, the savings transfer I'd created years ago as a cushion for my parents, deleted permanently. Fifth, my accountant. I emailed, requesting a full audit of personal support given to extended family over the past 8 years. Sixth, a family lawyer, not for lawsuits, just for boundaries and documentation. Every step was quiet. No big announcement, no confrontation, just removal, just the end of access. Around 2 a.m., after the last account was changed, I closed my laptop and set my pen down. The house was silent. Even the fridge hum felt distant. Darius set a mug of tea beside me, not as comfort, but as grounding. Do you feel better? He asked. No, I answered. I feel it. There was no satisfaction. Not yet. Just the realization. My silence that night, walking out without a word, refusing to plead or argue, was the first act of power I'd taken in years. And the blueprint I drafted on that legal pad was power made real. Every unchecked box on my family's budget, every deposit they expected, every bill waiting for my name, it would all hit them like a winter storm they never saw coming. Not out of revenge, but out of protection for my sons, for my home, for the part of me that remembered what it felt like to live on crumbs. The plan wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was administrative, methodical, precise, a quiet rebalancing long overdue. And by dawn, as the first light crept across our kitchen floor, I realized something. They had taught my children to expect less. Now they would learn what happens when I stopped giving more. The first sign that my silence had reached them came exactly 2 days later. I was packing Jalen's art supplies for school when my phone lit up with my father's name. Harold, who rarely called unless a payment was late or a new problem had come up. Selena, he said, skipping any greeting, there's some kind of issue with the mortgage. The transfer didn't go through. I didn't bother sitting down. There's no issue, I replied. I canceled it. The pause on the other end was sharp, the kind that slices through certainty. You canceled it. Without warning. I warned you, I said quietly. You just weren't listening. He inhaled, steadying himself. This is your parents' home. We rely on, I know exactly what you rely on, I cut in. That's why it stopped. Before he could answer, another call buzzed in. My sister Vanessa, who had laughed while my son sat hungry in a corner, was already panicking. I picked up. Selena, what did you do? She demanded. My car payment got rejected. They said the co-signer blocked adjustments. You know I can't afford a hit on my credit right now. I leaned against the counter, watching the morning sun hit Theo's cereal bowl. You'll have to manage, I said. The way you expect my sons to manage with whatever scraps they're given. That was a misunderstanding. You said my boys were born to live off what's left. Those were your words. Silence. Not guilt, just the sound of someone recalculating their losses. Before she could recover, my mother, Ellen, the master of emotional leverage, called on FaceTime. I let it ring twice before answering. Her face was tight with panic. Sweetheart, she began shakily. Your father and I need to talk to you. The bills. Things are piling up faster than we expected. We're in a difficult situation. Are you? I said calmly. You know we depend on that support. It isn't fair to punish us like this. Punish? The word hung in the air. You punish my sons, I said, right in front of me. That was different, she insisted. We were being realistic about how the world works. No, I said. You were being realistic about how much you thought you could get away with, because you assumed I'd always pay. Her expression cracked. First confusion, then fear. Selena, please. We could lose the house. And my children, I said softly, could have lost their sense of worth if I stayed silent. She flinched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't bargain. I just laid out the truth in the same steady tone they'd use to rank grandchildren by normalcy. The mortgage help won't return, I said. The automatic transfers are gone. The cushion fund is gone. The co-signing access is locked. From now on, you live on your income like every other adult. Selena, she whispered, you can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I replied. I'm stopping what you were doing to my children. Another silence, this one raw, unguarded. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix the fallout. They were. And somewhere in the background of their panic, raised voices, footsteps on hardwood, I heard the beginning of something they never thought they'd feel: desperation. The same desperation my sons felt sitting in a corner with empty plates. Only this time, the emptiness wasn't on my children's laps. It was in my parents' bank accounts, in their plans, in the security they thought I owed them. Their hierarchy collapsed exactly where it was built, on the foundation of my silence. And now that silence was gone, in the weeks that followed, the fallout settled in with a quietness that felt almost surreal. There were no dramatic confrontations, no midnight arrivals at my door, no scenes worthy of a family intervention. Instead, everything unfolded the way truth usually does: slow, steady, and impossible to outrun. My parents, Ellen and Harold, who once lived in a house too big for their needs, moved into a modest apartment across town. My sister Vanessa, who used to talk about comfort and normal families, picked up extra shifts to cover the payments she'd always assumed I'd handle. But in my own home, the air felt lighter. Dallin, my thoughtful 8-year-old, started taking the main seat at our dinner table, the one he used to avoid because that's where guests sat. Theo, always energetic, began talking more, asking questions, telling stories, laughing louder than he ever had at my parents' house. One evening, as I washed dishes, I watched them through the kitchen doorway. They weren't waiting for permission. They weren't checking adult faces to see if they could take seconds. They just existed, comfortable, visible, whole. Darius stood beside me, drying plates. You seem quieter, he said. I'm not quiet, I answered. I'm settled. He nodded, understanding without needing more. The quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space to think, space to breathe, space for my children to know their worth wasn't measured by someone else's rules. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt aligned with myself, with my boys, with the boundaries I should have drawn years ago. What they lost was comfort. What I gained was clarity. And for the first time in a long time, that balance finally felt right. In the end, it wasn't the money I took back that changed everything. It was the space I reclaimed. The day my parents taught my sons they were meant for crumbs was the day I stopped feeding a system that starved them. Some boundaries break families. Mine simply revealed the truth. My boys don't sit in corners anymore. And I will never apologize for choosing their worth over anyone's comfort, not even my own parents. If this story resonates with you, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and share your own boundary setting moment below. Your voice might be the spark someone else needs.